Hey, what's going on, guys? EnteRChazmaN here. We're back with EnteRChazmaN 2. They said we would never do it again. They said episode 2 wouldn't happen, but it's happening. So, what's up, Phoenix?
Oh, not too much. I'm just, being trapped down here in your basement, being forced to talk video games with you. So,
Yep.
normal day.
Lock and key. He's not getting out. So yeah, what's going on, guys? We have quite the setup for you. I feel like we're very video game heavy today, right?
I would hope so. It's a video game podcast, so if it's not video games, I feel like we missed the point.
I have us dubbed as kind of everything entertainment based, but yeah. So I felt like this week a super interesting place to start would be this EA denies blaming Halo Infinite for Battlefield 2042 failure. Which, did you get to read up anything on this, Phoenix?
Oh yeah. No, I saw the report.
I guess a little bit of background on me and Phoenix on for Battlefield is we actually used to be huge Battlefield fans. What games would you say we played? Was it Bad Companies 1 and 2 and maybe 3 and 4, right?
So I know the first one we kind of played was back when we first got our 360s. They had that was it Battlefield Modern Combat demo where it's like one level and we just could take copters, fly to the top of the buildings, and just snipe each other for an hour. So I think that was the first thing that kind of introduced us to the Battlefield kind of gameplay loop. After that, Battlefield 3, I think we played a fair amount of. Bad Company 2, Bad Company 1 didn't have online. I think it was just campaign, right?
Did it really not? I don't remember that at all.
I am pretty sure, and somebody, watching this in retrospect can probably correct us, but I'm pretty sure Bad Company 1 was just pure campaign. 2 was campaign and then had a large multiplayer component, but I know I played a lot of that. So that and 3 I played a lot during about the same time period. And then they had like a, was it that Xbox Live arcade game? I don't know if you played that. It was like 1943. It was like just like a couple maps in Japan that you kind of ran through. That was pretty good. So, I enjoyed the Battlefield games back in like the 360 days.
I know you were bigger on Battlefield than me.
Yeah, I got into them. Those were the days when I was really big into just about all the multiplayer shooters, whether it be Gears or Call of Duty or Battlefield. I've definitely kind of fallen off that wagon a little bit in recent years, but yeah, I remember having fond memories of playing those. I think I started falling off about when 4 got introduced. I think I played a little bit of that, and then nothing really after that point.
I don't think we even owned that first Modern Warfare game. I think we just played that demo continuously.
Yeah, we just played the demo.
It was just a demo. We just kept continuously playing that one level on Xbox Live for like months and months and months. What a good game.
Yeah, that was fun.
But yeah, so kind of in ridiculousness, if you guys don't know, to be totally transparent, me and Phoenix, as far as I know, have not actually played or purchased Battlefield 2042. Needless to say, and for me, the writing was kind of on the walls. There were not good things that were coming out of that beta, and just in general, my kind of interest for Battlefield was kind of waning, or has been waning anyway, so I don't know, do you kind of feel that same way? Did you hear the kind of beta talks that were coming out of how bad that game was kind of playing?
Yeah, I think like with everybody else, I had seen the first initial trailer. I wasn't like jiving to get back into Battlefield anytime soon, but it looked impressive. The huge, scale kind of city battles that were happening, all the destruction, the tornado coming at the building, like it was an impressive trailer. So there was some hype going into at least the beta. But I think I was probably watching Skill Up's review of the beta, and he was not kind to that game. And I think a lot of it was, as it was pretty well documented, all the technical bugs and issues. But he mentioned a lot of just like gameplay decisions too that they had kind of switched and changed regarding how the squads worked, and that was concerning. I think more than anything else. As I said, I wasn't dying to hop back into Battlefield anytime soon, but that kind of not review necessarily, but that kind of insight on how the game was changing and from a gameplay perspective was definitely, kind of removing my interest in the game, at least to a certain extent.
Well, I think what like the nail in the coffin for that game for me was, I remember several months prior, DICE, I'm pretty sure DICE, right? That was the company?
Yeah, DICE, the developer.
DICE had come out and said that was when they announced that there's going to be no campaign. And for me, it's like I can understand why you would make that decision, because maybe you want to put more resources, more time into into creating the multiplayer, but like, I mean, clearly now with hindsight, that wasn't the case. Maybe I don't know. You know what I mean? Like clearly that PvP did not receive more care. But yeah, for me that was kind of a big thing. It's like I understand spending $60 to some people might be worth it for like a perfect, great multiplayer, but for a game that historically has come with campaign multiplayer, I don't know. For me, it was just like, I'm good. What about you? Did the campaign missing kind of affect your desire for it?
No, I mean, as I said, I wasn't, just jonesing to get back into Battlefield regardless. And
Yeah.
thinking back to all the Battlefields I played campaign-wise, the only campaigns that, I mean, I think were, I don't want to say enjoyable, because, I mean, they all were enjoyable to a certain extent, but the ones I would say were really good ones that I'd probably go back and play were probably the Bad Company ones.
Yeah.
Like, Battlefield 3, for what I remember, is really forgettable. Forgettable 4, from what I played, was about the same, so I don't know how much I would have cared about this campaign.
Those,
of course,
those
they
games
could always
campaigns definitely aren't like Call of Duty memorable from some of the older ones.
Yeah, I mean, for what I remember, at least the mainline ones, barring the Bad Companies, they weren't real heavy on like having the same kind of narrative driven structure for their characters and stuff like that. It was more just like playing through different battle scenarios and whatnot, which was fun. I enjoyed that for the gameplay aspect, but once again, kind of forgettable in the grand scheme of things. So I guess to that end, like I honestly have campaign or not in 2042. I mean, I probably could have taken it or leaving it. It probably would have depended on just how high quality the campaign was. Or on the other end, I mean, if they at least had put forth a really strong, polished type multiplayer offering, I doubt I would have cared about the campaign so much. So I don't know. With this particular game franchise, the your browser died.
I saw that. You keep going.
I don't know. The campaign wasn't nearly as big of a sticking point for this franchise as it would have been for maybe something else. Like the Call of Duties, even though I haven't played a lot of those campaigns in a while, those campaigns I usually enjoyed more playing through. So missing the campaign, I think, hits a little harder on that kind of franchise. But Battlefield just didn't have that same feeling for me with the campaign.
Yeah, true. And like I said, guys, just a few notes I have here. Again, there were problems within the beta, I think that was, other than the campaign being missing, that was like an obvious sign that it's just like, hey, there's problems here. I mean, if you guys don't know, from what I've read, now once again, where I kind of read all of these problems is I actually watched Angry Joe's review when it came out, so like some of these are from there, and some of these other ones are also picked apart from other articles I've read. And again, I think these are all launch bugs, so a lot of these may have been solved, perhaps some of them not, but some just basic stuff is from Angry Joe's video and a lot of other ones. Apparently screen flickering was like a real big problem at launch. There was just bugs preventing players from joining servers. There's bots and players being able to revive one another, which that seems like that would be a problem. Game info and stats not shown at the end of matches. The actual biggest one that I've actually seen in gameplay is parachutes remaining open when players land. Angry Joe had like a bunch of that. And then, of course, just other basic server, like excessive match dropping, lag, hitbox detection, rubber banding, and frame rates per second issues. But yeah, so I don't think in totality some of those things are a huge problem, I guess, in a launch. Right? I mean, some of those, that many is a problem, but those are, like, things you expect in a launches for a lot of games. I think what's especially disappointing about it is that a lot of that stuff was found and complained about within the beta. So once again, that's a problem when, you're not fixing things that you kind of already know about, correct?
All right, well, there's a threshold for, what you can put up with as far as bugs in a game. Like, we're all, I think, understanding to an extent that, these games are complex pieces of software. There's a lot of moving components. So, I mean, things are going to break. I mean, of course, we don't want to assume that. We want our games to be as polished as possible. But, the odd bug here or there, I think most of us can deal with on a launch day situation. But it sounds like, at least from the reports, once again, I have not personally played it, but this thing was littered with bugs. Some of the ones that you were mentioning, and I remember hearing about some other ones that were causing, like, instability in matches and stuff like that. So, I think just the totality of how many issues occurred at launch definitely not only is just going to put a bad taste in your mouth, but it's going to definitely, I think, what's a good way to say this? Lessen your confidence in kind of how that game is going to move forward as far as how quickly they'll add these fixes. I mean, how long before the community just moves on to the next big shooter game? So you have to decide, is it worth investing your time in a game that might get fixed in 6 months or might not get fixed in a year or two? We've seen that happen with a bunch of games. So I think the bigger issue nowadays is just how big these these AAA juggernaut titles are. Like, once they set a release date, it's really hard for the publishers above them to say, okay, it's okay to shift that release date so you can have more development time. I think most of us could agree that this game could have definitely benefited from another 6 months in the oven, maybe a year. But I mean, once you put out a date, having to change that date means the publisher has to put in more money into marketing to update the consumer for that date. It means more development costs that they're looking at sunken funds. So there's just, I think, a lack of willingness by this upper level, whether it be administration or publishers, to actually do what the game needs, because once again, they're looking at it as they need to get a return on their investment. So I don't know, it's a tricky thing, but I think that's why we end up in this situation so often, is these games are just heading or barreling towards a release date, and come hell or high water, they're releasing at a certain point. And a lot of times the consumer is the ones who have to kind of pay the penalty for it.
Okay, so yeah, that's kind of the foundation, kind of the place to start as to what the issues with Battlefield was. And all that kind of leads into EA's rationale as to, or reasoning as to, what they feel all of these problems were to, or what they're blaming. So I will switch now over to this article on PlayStationLifestyle.net, and pretty much it just says EA denied, or I think they fixed the article, but it initially said EA blames Halo Infinite for Battlefield's 2042 failures, and essentially the reason why it's so kind of ridiculous to blame another game for your problems is just, I don't know. But yeah, essentially what happened here is published on Xfire, which I had to look it up. Apparently Xfire is some sort of video game just communication thing, I guess similar to maybe something like Discord. But what happened is trustworthy insider Tom Henderson claimed that EA partially attributed to misfortune on the release of Halo Infinite. So essentially this happened recently during a town hall meeting, post-mortem, and apparently a Laura Miele brought up Halo Infinite for some reason. I would have to go back and really watch or listen, but okay, so yeah, once again, basically the whole article just within it kind of just has this lady kind of blaming multiple things. Essentially, she blames the Frostbite engine for being old and out of date, and apparently like a crap ton of time went into them updating it. It took them approximately 18 months to update the Frostbite engine, which is kind of crazy. I mean, Phoenix is more knowledgeable about, engines and kind of how game creation takes place. I mean, does that sound like normal? Does that sound like the proper way a game should be developed?
Yeah, so here's the thing. I mean, you hear developers, cry foul about their engine troubles all the time, but engines are the most complex piece of development, right? It's what kind of puts all these pieces together, from the gameplay to the rendering to the audio cues to everything. So, it's a big task. And I think one of the other things they mentioned along with, the engine itself having to be updated is they were, having to work through the pandemic. And I have a lot of sympathy just in general. I mean, we all had to work through the pandemic, so I think we get some of the, the consolations and considerations that had to be made during that time. But I couldn't even imagine having to work through a large software development project on that scale through that kind of environment. I mean, you got to think that these developers went from working in-house, having direct access to their software and tools, to now being sent off and having to work home remotely, where their internet might be shoddy. They might have issues authenticating in to actually have credential to access maybe certain applications on their server. Maybe their studio wasn't set up for that kind of remote work, so maybe there weren't even systems in place to access parts of their engine. Like, there's a lot of considerations there that I would imagine when that pandemic hit, they lost probably 2 months just figuring out how that new infrastructure is going to be, with getting people sent out to the remote locations, getting maybe hardware and technology set up for them to communicate. So I think that's 2 months right there that's eaten into this.
But doesn't everyone has to kind of deal with that, though? That's not like I would understand it more if it was like this is a problem that we only had to deal with, but seeing as how every other game company is dealing with the same thing, it's just, I don't
But
know.
so many of the game companies also had issues too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not trying to excuse their faults, but I just want to put it into perspective. And it's going to affect different companies different ways depending on what they needed to go ahead and correct and fix and implement. I guess the point I'm getting at here is, when they set out to decide, okay, we need to go and update the Frostbite engine, I'm sure that decision was made, pre-pandemic. They weren't anticipating all these slowdowns and issues that were going to incur. So
Mm-hmm.
with how they were probably picturing their timeline without a pandemic occurring, it was probably something feasible. And they were like, okay, it'll probably take us 6 months to make these changes and updates, blah blah blah. And then the pandemic hits right in the middle of that. So all these maybe complex decisions that they decide they need to make to their engine are going to get stretched. And there's a point where when you start investing your time and correcting an engine like that, there's no going back. I mean, you've already invested a lot of time and resources into changing it, so you got to push forward. So, I mean, without being there in person, I can't, say for sure how valid, the 18 months is. But I am more sympathetic to the fact that it probably could have been necessary. I mean, engines are complex things. You got to make sure that any changes you make don't break something else and that, give you the functionality you're looking for. So, I don't know. I take that into a strong consideration as it's probably, one of the underlying issues why the game's in the state it is. And I'm not saying that the game should have released in the state it did, but I get why the engine slowdown caused such heartache for him.
Mm-hmm. And so yeah, I mean, it's a bunch of kind of blaming and throwing things around. Again, the title for the article, I'll switch back over, but it says
That's all Halo's fault.
yeah, according to Meal, the comparison. I guess this is her kind of talking about the comparison, like in past tense, but the comparison between both games was not favorable because Halo Infinite was a very polished title, whereas Battlefield 2042 contained bugs and was not polished. So I kind of don't understand why she brought that up, where it's like, hey, this is a good game. This is a good game. Our game's bad. It hurt us. I don't understand that.
Well, I mean, I think there's some context missing here. I mean, I've read this, this quote now in a few different articles, and it reads a little differently in different places I've read. It, at least the take I'm kind of getting from this. And once again, I didn't hear this firsthand. Nobody really did.
Actually, I have it up right now. If you can, I think this kind of builds upon the context.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like she wasn't just outright, blaming Halo, but to be fair, that was a factor that impacted their sales, and I think that's reasonable. Now, I don't think it's so much they were blaming Halo for being a good game, like, oh man, I can't believe those developers at 343 decided to make a good game and make ours look bad. Like, I think there was some unfortunate timing there that, worked in Halo's favor. I mean, they were just releasing around their anniversary time. It was a good thing for them, very inconvenient for EA in this particular.
It would have been
scenario.
more understandable to me if she would have mentioned the fact that Halo launched early. Maybe if she would have said, because remember the PvP launched what, like,
Right. So it was
it a month earlier
unanticipated.
or something?
Yeah, it was like a month and a half.
Maybe if she would have like said that, I could understand where she's like, hey, this more polished game came out almost a month earlier. We weren't anticipating that. Like, but I don't know. To me, that adds just a little bit more context. But
Yeah, and I said I'm sure there's some context missing here, and I don't know. I think depending how you read into this, I know it sounds petty that they're blaming Halo, but I don't really think that's the case. I'm sure their discussion was looking at factors that impacted the sales of this game, and regardless if you think it's Halo's fault or anything, Halo coming out when it did, and at least having a good favorable kind of appearance when it first came out, that impacted Battlefield, I'm sure. I mean, they both, kind of occupy the same shooter space. I know they're different games, but there's a good chance you'll have people who are interested in Battlefield also be interested in Halo. And Halo is also packing with it a huge nostalgia punch for a lot of people. So when that comes out and you got a lot of friends joining that, especially in a free-to-play mode, that's going to tank your player base initially, especially if your game is not polished like Battlefield was. We mentioned that a few minutes ago. Like, if you are a gamer and you're looking to invest your time into a game, especially long term, like a shooter, you got to make that decision when the game comes out.
Halo launched early and it was free, so the PvP.
Yeah.
So
I guess that's my point. Like, if you were a gamer and you saw these two games come out, Halo is just kind of the obvious choice there. It's a polished game. It's free. It's not going to cost you a lot to kind of get into. Battlefield is a game that's now coming with a bunch of bugs and issues, and it's costly, at least to buy into. So, I don't know. It's just an easy. That's the thing with the shooter space. There's so many options. If it wasn't Halo, it would have been something else, though.
Yeah.
Some other shooter would have come out, and Battlefield is going to be in the same position it always was. And with this space, you have to come out, hit hard, because your consumers are just going to move on to the next competent shooter that's available. So, I think there's some truth, and I understand why they called Halo out. I don't really feel like they were just straight up blaming Halo. I feel like that, to at least a certain extent, is the media being like, oh, look at this, controversy between, DICE and wanting to blame 343. Like, I don't think that's really what happened here. It sounds like they were having an internal meeting about what went wrong, and however you want to shake it, Halo did impact their sales one way or the other.
Yeah. I don't know. So, I feel like we kind of touched on everything. I'm kind of going back through some of my questions that I had for you. And I guess kind of a really easy and fun one would just be, what exactly would it take for EA, DICE, and Battlefield to bring you back? Just kind of talking from my side, like, I'm not quite sure. For me, I would have to see the next Battlefield title come out and be favorably received and possibly have a campaign. But yeah, as for you, what would it kind of take for you?
Here's my thing. I kind of was alluding to this before. There's nothing really I think they could do to bring me back, per se. That's just not the kind of game I'm looking to play right now, for one. Honestly, if I would have been willing to get into Battlefield, I think when I initially saw the 2042 trailer, before knowing how terrible things were, if I was going to be interested, that probably would have done it for me, because that looked pretty good, all things considered. But right now, this is not the kind of game I'm looking to play, personally. If anything would bring me back, it'd be, friends. Like, if you hopped in and you're like, oh yeah, let's play some Battlefield 2042, then I'd be like, yeah, sure, I'll hop into that. But on my own accord, I'm probably not going to be rushing out to play probably any Battlefield anytime soon. But not that I think they're in general bad games. I have enjoyed them in the past, just not where I'm at right now.
Yeah. And I guess just as a whole, like, if you were just like a casual Battlefield consumer, someone that loves the brand, would you, I don't see how you could not, but would you be worried about DICE's handling of maybe a Bad Company 3 if it were to come out, or, how their handling of a future campaign would be? Would you be worried about Frostbite engine? Would there be anything you'd have to worry about? Be worried about?
So you kind of combined a few things there.
Yeah.
Am I worried about DICE? Here's the thing. I think a lot of this came down to they ran out of time for stuff. So I don't know how much of that is being concerned about DICE's capabilities versus is EA willing to give them the time and resources to make the game how it needs to be made. And that's what this whole thing kind of feels like. This game, if you had looked back at their, pre-game beta stuff, everybody was saying this game needs more time. EA knew at that point that game should have been given extra time.
They weren't saying it like that. I said they weren't saying it like that, I'm sure.
Oh, EA wasn't, but if you looked at any of the
I just meant fans.
They
were saying it probably a little differently.
Oh, yeah, but in general, there was a red flag that EA could have given them time and probably should have, but based upon whatever financial decisions they wanted to make, they weren't willing to do that. So it's not that I have lack of faith in DICE to make a good Battlefield game, because I think DICE is a a developer with a good past and putting out good polished games.
They're a big name in the gaming world. Yeah,
so there's a lot of talent in that studio. So I think it's just having a publisher who's willing to give them the resources and time they need. You mentioned Frostbite being a concern. I know one of the questions you sent me was, is Frostbite bad? And I don't really think that's fair.
Is it more utilization? Like other people in place that can utilize it better? Is that a thing?
Here's the thing. So when engines are made, they are made typically for, at least initially, for a certain type of game. Like the Frostbite game was made very much for certain shooters. When Unreal came out, it was almost like the backbone of Gears of War. So a lot of engines are very much catered towards something of a certain genre. So I think a lot of people complain about, the engine's going to cause problems, or it's not what it used to be. All engines need time to be updated and tweaked and to fit new gameplay mechanics. And I feel like, at least for this past issue with 2042, they just weren't given enough time to make those adjustments the way they needed to. Here's the thing. You can't just say, a game was bad, therefore Frostbite's bad. Okay? I think it's more a thing of knowing what engine works best for certain types of gameplay. And to kind of give you a story you might be familiar with, I'm going to talk about one of your favorite games for just a moment. Too Human. Does that bring back
Too
any fond
Human.
memories?
Yeah, that was a Silver. What was the name of the game?
Silicon Knights.
Silicon Knights. Yeah.
Do you remember all the controversy that came out with Silicon Knights and Epic and everything that happened there?
I remember what happened with the baseball player that owned it or owned that company, but I don't remember now as to the.
Okay, so there was a lawsuit that Silicon Knights brought up because they were licensing Unreal Engine 3 at the time to create Two Human.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess throughout development, they were complaining because Unreal was making updates and changes that was directly affecting their ability to create this game, blah, 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 blah. Which is kind of ridiculous because, I mean, Epic wasn't, trying to gun out for Silicon Knights to ruin their game. They were just, building out their engine.
I actually didn't know any of this.
Yeah, and I think the way the court ruling came out was it ruled in Epic's favor. Like, it was not Epic's fault that Silicon Knights couldn't figure out how to use the engine. So I think most of us could probably, looking back, agree Too Human wasn't that great of a game, but it wasn't Unreal's fault.
How dare you?
Yeah, but you see what I'm saying, right? It's not
Yeah.
the engine's fault for the game being bad necessarily. It's the developer's understanding of it, time to tweak it, add new features to it, make it fit their genre, what have you. So Unreal, I mean, arguably was the most popular engine of that entire gaming generation. I mean, goodness, there was a percentage that was put out a while ago. It was like over 50% or more games during that 360 PS3 era came out on Unreal. So Unreal was clearly a good engine, but you can make bad games with a good engine. And I feel like that's kind of what happened here. I mean, this engine probably needs some, more updates and more tweaking, and we got a bad game out of this particular iteration of it, but I think the engine could probably be tweaked further, fixed, or updated till, it fits the needs of whatever new game they want to make.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess just the last couple things I'll throw in before we move on. Phoenix, I'm showing Phoenix right now, but yeah, we're looking at the Metacritic score for Battlefield 2042. Unfortunately, it's not great. I'm not quite sure how the meta score is 68 and the user is 2.1.
Well, they're not calculated off the same thing. Meta is critic and user is people going in there and just, trashing the game and lowering everything.
It says mixed or average reviews. I mean, I don't know. That game sounds like it should be a lot lower than mixed or average.
Yeah, probably. So I have a quick question for you before we shift gears.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think EA or DICE, or however you want to look at this, should try to salvage 2042 or just be like, nope, lost cause, move on?
Do I think they should try and salvage it? I don't know. I guess I would have to look and see like what the call, like how much money they've lost on it and how much how much would they gain from moving on. I mean, as for someone like me, they've already lost me, like the average casual gamer for Battlefield 2042. I mean, if you're just asking me as a CEO head, or if you're asking me as a fan, if you're asking me as a fan of just games, I would say move on. You've kind of lost me. There's not, again, like you kind of mentioned it, there's not really much they could do to like really pique my interest. I mean, something that would like raise my eyebrow would be announcing a Bad Company 3, but
yeah, but that's not salvaging this game. Like, I'm talking about.
Oh no, I mean if they move on, yeah.
Right. I mean, I just to add my kind of 2 cents on there, answer my own question. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're good.
I mean, the EA was kind of in this situation with Anthem. Anthem did not do well for various reasons, and they were kind of put up against the decision: should we go ahead and fix it for whatever reason?
They fixed it, didn't they? No, they didn't. They shut it down.
No. I mean, they added stuff.
I'm kidding.
That's what I'm getting at. Like, if you're EA looking at this right now, you got to think the Anthem situation is just replaying in their heads. Because it's costly to correct the game.
Well, I was going to say, like, in hindsight, that ended up being a very good decision. Them dropping because I think they had like a major DLC that was a launch for it, and I don't think that ever came out. Wasn't it like Cataclysm? I think it was called.
I couldn't recall.
It was like a big, like a whole. It was like almost like the Witch Queen or whatever of Anthem, and I think they completely like dropped whatever that was and was just like.
You got to base it off if you still have a player base. Like, if you look at a comparative situation with something like Destiny, when Destiny was kind of at its low point, and they're like, oh, we need to fix this game, and they revamped it into Taken King. Destiny never truly lost a core player base, though.
Mm.
Like the numbers dipped, but there was always a fan base community there that was gonna buy into your product. You had a stable enough product to keep them going. Anthem never had that. They lost their community pretty quick, so there was nothing to feed and encourage them to have a new revamped version of the game. And it seems like that's where Battlefield's at right now, at least
I
2042.
would
Like
say
you've seen the player counts.
I would say at least revamping or revitalizing is much easier if you run a game that's not like multiplayer faceted only like Battlefield. Like you've noticed games like No Man's Sky have bounced back. There was another game I just had in my head that critically came out. I mean, No Man's Sky is a
Plenty of
good one.
games have done that. I mean, Final Fantasy 14 is probably the
That's probably the
one of the
best one.
greatest
Yeah.
turnarounds. Yeah, I don't think any game is at a like too far gone kind of state. Like they could put more resources in 2042 and probably make it a solid game, but at what point is that worth it? Especially for a game like this that's in a saturated market with other shooters. Like really, I don't think they'd ever get their return on investment at that
Cyberpunk's
point.
currently going through that right now.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think they should move on. Personally, I'm
I
sure the
agree.
fans who paid for the game aren't happy to hear that because they're not getting anything out of that game at this point. That's part where they have that petition to try to get their money back.
Well, I'm sure I'd be very curious if it's very similar to how movies work, which I know you know, but like I think they say the majority of the earnings that movies make when they come out generally is within like that first week or something. So like any of those residuals are like nothing. It's like pennies compared to after most of the money they make is their first week. So I'd be very curious if how a video game like this, like
Well,
is it very much getting the going when it's hot? Is that the I don't know how, but
I mean, I think it depends on the type of game, and I didn't look into the structure 24/2 enough to say, but I'm going to assume that it had plenty of microtransactions built into it, and that's how most of these games really make the bulk of their money in a lot of places. Like they try to, of course, sell hot while they can during that launch window, but they usually hop down on sales pretty quick, so they can get out as many copies as possible to the community, and then they just hope they can get you as a long-term player. So you're buying that new player skin or that new gun coloring, whatever it may be. And I think that's where they hope to make a lot of their money. It's not always in that launch window. So honestly, it's kind of the opposite of movies, I think, depending on the game.
actually I did totally skipped over it, but I did have a note for something similar to that where I have EA admits game sales have been disappointing and have not reached goals, but have yet to release sales numbers, which like I have a feeling that game probably, like they may not say it, I have a feeling they probably made up their money. I think that's safe to say, right? They probably made up their money.
For 2042?
Yeah, they probably aren't killing it, but I guarantee you they've at least made their cost of creating it.
I mean, I don't know. Without seeing numbers, I don't know how much money they would have sank into this game. I mean, games are expensive to make, and it did not sell great, I don't think. I mean, I said without numbers, you can't even do the math there. So I would hope they probably sold enough to make that cost back, but I'm honestly kind of doubtful, depending just how poorly it's been received and how quickly it was poorly received. I would imagine that turned a lot of people off to buying this game really quick. So I don't know. I'm not sure if they broke even or not. If so, I doubt it was by much.
When do you think is a good sorry, we'll move on, but I got one more like idea. Like when do you think is a good time to move on? Do you think you should move on prior to you reaching your sales goals of like, or do you think you should move on to when you do reach your goals and maybe that's the time to bounce out if you think it sucks, or you know what I mean? Like should you I don't know. You get what I'm saying?
Uh, kind of. I mean, I think it really depends. So here's the thing. I mean, if you're talking about moving on, like revamping the game.
I'm saying moving on. Like when do you move? When do you think you should move on? Like if you're looking at the numbers and the numbers say you will make up your money at some point, should you keep going on or?
If they make their money back, I would imagine the smart business decision would be to make their money back at the very least. I mean, nobody wants to, have a loss. But I think it depends. Like for you to make that money back, how long do you have to support the game for? Is that taking away resources from putting into another game that could potentially, make more money? So there is a time you have to cut your losses as well. So in this situation, I think they should cut it sooner rather than later because the player base has dwindled. I mean, we know most of the players or Battlefield players have moved on to what, Battlefield 5, something like that. So they're playing the old game now more than the new
They're
game.
playing like two old games.
Yeah, so you already lost community members. Could you bring them back? Maybe, but once you shift to another game, even if it's a temporary thing in your mind, you're gone, right? As soon as
Oh
you get
yeah.
off a game and play something else, like you don't come back usually, at least not without something really tantalizing. And I don't see them wanting to invest that much money in 2042. I mean, I think they might look at it and be like, okay, take what's good about this game, package it up, put it into the next game, and hopefully make the next one better, hit harder, and get more sales for that next iteration. That's where I think this is going to end up. I mean, I could be wrong, but just looking at how they dropped Anthem, it makes me feel with a game that probably isn't making them even nearly as much as Anthem did, I think they'll probably back out and just move on to the next thing.
Yeah. I think it'll definitely be interesting to kind of see the life that this game has. Like, will it drop off? Will they continue supporting it? My guess is pride and wanting to make up their money will keep them supporting it. That's my guess.
No, I doubt it personally. I think they'll support it. I think as far as like keeping servers up for a while, however long that may be for the player base they've got, but I don't think they're going to throw a lot of resources into tweak this game and try to make it a huge amount better. I mean, they'll have bug fixes and whatnot. I think the other issue, and I know we want to move on, but some of the issues I heard about this game was that they changed core gameplay about it that people don't like. That's a harder thing to fix. Like, it's one thing fixing a bug where your parachute opens when it shouldn't, something like that. But if there's a core way the game has now been structured that your community is not jiving with, that's a more costly thing to fix and figure out and change, and that I don't know if it's worth it.
It would be tough for me to say anything about that, have an opinion, because I'll be honest, it's been quite a bit since I've even played a Battlefield game, so I'm not even quite sure what.
The one thing I heard, once again, I'm speaking without playing the game, and I've shot myself in the foot doing that before. But the core to Battlefield that was always fun to me was the squad-based mechanics. That I could be, an engineer, just fixing tanks, and I'm helping the team, or it could be, out there getting the most kills in the team, helping the team. Either way, I could support in my way. It seems like they did squad changes where your roles and your classes don't have that impact anymore. Like, they don't have that same support level. They don't have that same, like you can play the game how you want kind of thing. And I could be wrong. Once again, I'm just kind of going off what I heard from, other media outlets and reviewers. But if that's really a core gameplay mechanic that they changed, man, that turns me off just even hearing that. So I don't know.
Oh, the game came to me that I was thinking about earlier when I was talking about No Man's Sky was Sea of Thieves, the game that launched pretty terribly, but from what I've heard, the game's pretty fun now. But
here's the thing: that game never launched terribly. I think
it was just content, empty.
Yeah, but the game was
there.
solid, and I know there's a difference with how these games have launched though. Like when we all played Sea of Thieves. When I say we all, you, me, and a couple of other buddies, we hopped in, played Sea of Thieves when it first came out. And here's the thing: it played well, and there was an enjoyable loop there. It
was fun for an hour.
I think it was. Yeah, it was lacking some content, but to be fair, none of us really gave it a huge amount of a chance after that. I know our buddy Kyle hopped on and he played for a lot more, and I think he really enjoyed himself after a certain point. And I think it was just us not willing or able to give that much time commitment to it. But I don't think that game was ever bad, and it developed a core following, kind of like how Destiny did, right? Destiny, when it came out, lacking a crap load of content, but it created a core community that would follow it, and that just, gave it the motivation and momentum it needed to, grow and evolve and change. So this game is very different, right? This game has launched buggy, missing features, gameplay's been tweaked and changed. Like, there's less of that redeeming factor to 2042
that's gotta be a problem too.
Now.
That's gotta be a huge problem too when your game is like centered around like precision, fast twitchy, it's all like very intricate, and if you even have mild server problems, that's got to throw off people that are like, the hardcore sweaty people. I don't know.
Yeah, and once again, people have other options. Like Halo was an option. You still have Call of Duty games. Like, it's easy to find another shooter to get into. Like something like Sea of Thieves, there was nothing even really like that at the time. Same thing with Destiny. I mean, there were other shooters, but not in that live service MMO-like kind of feel.
Yeah.
So they at least had the benefit of being unique in that regard. 2042 just seems like, another Battlefield game that is not nearly up to the same standards of the old ones, and there's just better games to play. So I'll leave it at that. You can move along.
Oh, well, thank you. We were
You're
supposed
welcome.
to keep these.
It's my podcast now, right?
We were supposed to keep these time segments. We ran a little long on that one, but yeah, I guess overall, just kind of recapping that. It's a really disappointing situation with Battlefield. It's a franchise I have a history with, and it's definitely sad. And hopefully EA can kind of bounce back and make Battlefield great again. I don't know. All right, so moving on to a really interesting story. This is actually one I didn't hear about. Phoenix actually kind of shot it to me during the week. But yeah, let's move on over. So recently, hundreds of sealed retro games that were just publicly revealed could be worth $1 million. So essentially what happened... let's see. So essentially what happened, they were found by an employee at a retro games or a game retailer. So apparently the customer went into the store and was looking to get prices on possible trade-ins. And let's see, this retailer was located in Nebraska. Store owner is Chris Thompson. He's I guess the employee kind of pulled him in when he was like, "Dude, you'll never guess what we got at the front desk."
Right.
But yeah, kind of basically they're just vestiges of an old video game store that shuttered in the mid-90s. I guess there's some discrepancy as to exactly when. It says possibly 94, but apparently some of these games came out in 96 or 97, so there's it's a bit odd there, but
mid-90s.
Yeah. Apparently the lot will eventually be sold. I guess the seller didn't actually sell, but he allowed the employees and the owner to come to his house and to record everything that was going on. I should probably play that so you guys can see.
Now, there's a detail I might just be missing because I read through it, but I don't know if I found it. So, the guy who has these games, what was his relationship with the games? Like, did he find these games, or was he the original store owner back in the 90s and just had all this in storage?
I don't know. They never quite said exactly how he came across
all of these my games. Thing. I wasn't sure. Like, I know he came into this local game store. It's like, hey, I got all this stuff, but I don't know his story for having all of it, which I don't know. That I think will change my opinion on some stuff depending. But regardless,
he stole it all.
I'm not saying that. Not saying that.
No. But yeah, apparently the guy apparently is looking to sell the entire lot, and what is there could be possibly worth millions. There's some crazy stuff in there. Apparently this footage that I'm showing you guys right now, apparently this only encompasses half of what is there, which is crazy because there's I'm salivating. There's boxes and boxes full of sealed retro games, that's the dream. That's me and Phoenix's dream, is rolling up on stuff like that.
So before we get too deep in this, I have a question for you. And I said you're only seeing a snapshot of this. Say this is, I don't know.
Oh, look at that Turtles in Time sealed.
I know, that one's a good one. Say this is, I don't know, 10% of the entire lot, which I imagine that's probably pretty low. It's probably closer to maybe half. I don't know. But looking at the big hitter games that are in here, which I know you haven't shown them all yet, but there's Turtles in Time sealed, Chrono Trigger, there's some Final Fantasies, there's Breath of Fire 2.
Mortal Kombat.
Do you think it's really worth millions of dollars? Even if this is only 10%. If you think there's 10 times more of this, is it millions of dollars worth of inventory?
I don't actually believe it's worth millions of dollars, but that's because me and you are very up to date on the news and what's going on with the grading market and how WADA and all that stuff works. So I don't believe that it's actually worth that much, but I believe that the market thinks it is.
Exactly. I think he would get millions.
Oh, he would get millions.
I don't think it's worth millions.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so let's see. So yeah, apparently the guy is still going through the grading process and all of that stuff.
He's not getting graded yet, is he? I thought it said he's just.
It said
considering.
It said he started the grading. I think it said but he's still early.
Okay, yeah, I didn't see. I saw that they were talking about the potential for grading and how long that would take. I don't know if he actually.
It could be. I could be wrong on that. But yeah, I mean, I kind of have it in my notes here as well. You just mentioned it. It's going to be very interesting to see how YouTubers, influencers, collectors, and recent game sales from Wada, from games that have been graded by Wada, kind of affect, how his sale goes. I mean, recently on Wada, A Legend of Zelda sold for $900,000, and of course, everyone and their grandma all heard about the Super Mario 64 selling for $1.5 million. I literally had a grandparent, Grammys. They know you like video games, and they saw that, and they're like, you could get $1.5 million for your Mario, and it's like, yeah. No, Grandma, I'm not getting
the one with your name written on there in Sharpie, like little ChazZ written on the side.
Yeah, it's like, no, Grandma, you don't know anything about
that's gonna pay for your mortgage, Chaz, right there.
I know, but yeah, so I guess just to name off a few, I mean, Phoenix already said some, but there's Mortal Kombat 2, TMNT, Turtles in Time, Final Fantasy 3, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Zombies Ate My Neighbors, Castlevania Bloodlines, Breath of Fire 2, and apparently there's massive numbers of sports titles that are sealed in there.
Yeah, and that's what I noticed, and there's definitely some amazing games.
Oh, there's a lot of stinkers too. Yeah,
you look through those boxes, and it's like 80 to 90% of a box is filler stuff. So that's why I definitely think that, $1 million price is really far out there. Even if you wager some of these main games are worth, $20,000 or something like that. Once again, I think that's inflated, but even at that price, I don't think there's $1 million in there. But
I guarantee you, based on the WADA and the grading process, this guy's probably going to make out with 3 to 4 million, maybe easy, if that's half of what's there. But yeah, so I did have a quick question for you. I don't actually know about you, but do you care about collecting sealed games anyways? Like, I mean, we've been doing this for a while, and to be honest, I really don't care about sealed games. Like I guess it would be nice to I do have some, but it's most certainly not something I personally care about. What about you?
Yes, I don't especially care about it. Like, usually if I buy a game, it's hopefully with the intent of one day playing it. I know at this point I've got too many games to play, and my general tagline is, well, I'm building out my retirement at this point. So when I'm 60, 70 years old, I can start, playing some of these games. But that doesn't mean I don't have sealed games, but they're not usually sealed for the fact of keeping them sealed. It's just I haven't gotten around to playing it yet, so I haven't ripped off the package. I mean, don't get me wrong. If I come across like a sealed Pokemon Red or something at a yard sale for $5,
look at this one. Look how many soccer, and I think that says NBA, soccer, some other sport. Yeah,
stuff like that.
So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, if I find a sealed game that I know has value to it, like, and I get it cheap, like, a Pokemon game or Super Nintendo game, what have you, I would probably keep it sealed just for knowing the sheer value that could be there. But at the same time, I'm not looking for that or going to invest a lot of my money in that by any means.
So that actually transitions well into one of the questions I had, which I think this might have been my favorite question I had. But, sorry, cough. So what would you do with a video game haul like this, and what would you keep? So I want to answer first, because I feel like, again, everyone, or I'll switch back over. I just mentioned it. I personally don't care about sealed games. So what I would probably do is I would probably keep... I would have to look and see how many dupes are in there and how many dupes of each thing. But I personally wouldn't be looking to, like, totally ball out on money. Like, I would probably keep a single sealed of each title and then still sell the rest. So, again, it would come down to how many dupes there are, but... I mean, that's just me. So I would be perfectly happy getting $1 million if it meant I could keep like a single of each sealed one. But what about you?
I'd sell a lot of it. Like, I mean, my opinions on collecting stuff like that is slowly changing. Like, I definitely don't care about the sealed aspect of it. I think it's my biggest thing. If it's a game that I don't think I'm ever going to be able to play, and if I have games like that are sealed that I know cost, tens of thousands of dollars, I'm never going to play them. So for me, just leaving that on my shelf long term isn't super enticing. Like, I would keep probably Turtles in Time, just because that game means a lot to me. I played that game all the time when I was a kid. So that I'd find kind of special to leave, sealed and put it on the shelf. But other than that, I don't know, maybe Chrono Trigger, just because, Chrono Trigger's awesome. But
I would keep
I would
a single.
sell most of it.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it was open. Like there were open copies in there. Like I think like that X-Men, I'd probably hold on to that, which I think I already have X-Men. But you know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Like games that I could actually play, I'd make room for. But that's the other thing too. I don't have a lot of room. My collection is tight
My
in my
goodness,
tiny
look
little
at that
game room.
video there. Hold on. Look at those barrels going all the
I
way
know.
down.
A lot of games there, but no, for sheer size of it, I would sell it just because I can't keep that much stuff, and for the amount of potential value, at least right now, I'd sell a lot. I would keep some of the big ones that I think are neat for me that I have strong nostalgia for, but other than that, yeah, I'm getting rid of that
So
personally.
the second half of that question I had was, what would you do with an extra million or however much you think you would get for it? So just curious, what would you do with that money?
Oh, I'd pay off my house, probably do some investing, go to Disney World. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Um, Man, I'd just pay off some bills,
Yeah,
man. That'd
put
be
away a
my
lot of
thought.
money. You'd
Yeah,
be
I
able to
don't think I
retire,
have.
retire super early.
Oh, well, I doubt that. I mean, $1 million is not what it used to be. I mean, I definitely love paying off my house. That'd be great, and I'd probably hold on to a lot of it. I'd invest some, do savings. At least then, I'd be a little freer with my time. Probably let my wife quit her job. That'd be nice.
There
But
we
other
go.
than that, that's about it.
Well, as for me, actually, I love this question, but for me, my new favorite, not new, but like my favorite hobby currently is getting to make content for you guys and getting to make. I'm loving doing the stuff with the podcast. I'm loving doing the stuff with my YouTube channel. I would use whatever money I got to be able to dedicate more time to you guys. So that's me
Aww.
being as lovely as I could. Is I would just, I mean, Phoenix knows, everything I do is I try and put as much time into content creating as I could. So I would sell off what I could, keep a copy of each, and then dedicate more time to that. So,
You do it all for the Chazzy Coons.
yep, you would get more ChazmaN. Uh, So a quick question I had is that apparently this sale or these games came from a retailer from the 90s, and
Mhm.
this guy is just looking to sell all of a sudden in 2022. One question I had is, why do you think this seller waited so long to look into selling? Was he waiting on the market to be what it is today? I mean, I guess the market technically is as crazy as it's ever been. So yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to ask you earlier. If you knew who this guy was and his relationship to the games, like if he was, the original store owner, that means at some point he was pretty well versed in, the gaming market. And like once
Mm-hmm.
you're, tapped into something like that, you don't, I think he would still have, passing interest in it. So he would have known where the market's been at for a
He
while.
very well could have
Um,
had a deal set up with this store owner where he's like, I'll come in and act like I don't know the value, and you'll get free publicity from getting put on
Maybe.
Kotaku.
Like, I mean, I don't know, and I'm not one to jump to the
I'm not saying that's true.
skeptical
I'm just
side of
saying.
things, but I mean, maybe. Um, like, it's just odd that someone who might have had that much knowledge about selling video games would take a collection of this size that you would have to know there's a good amount of value in there to just some local game store to have them do valuation of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's be honest, that'd be like me walking into GameStop and be like, "Hey, how much is my sealed copy of Chrono Trigger?" And they'd be like, "I don't know, I'll give you $5 for it." So, I mean, I know this is a little different because like a local like retro store, but even at that, like I wouldn't take this collection into a game store like that to get the valuation on the pricing. I
Yeah.
would, take it somewhere else where there's some other figure. So I guess that makes me think that maybe this isn't someone who was originally tied to the game store when all these games, were shut down of that particular store. Like maybe it's just some guy who came across this somewhere that has no understanding of the market. Then I could understand this scenario kind of playing out. But someone educated bringing it to these guys feels odd, to say the least. And the timing on it, I mean, this is about the right time to sell, I suppose. The market's still really high. I mean, I'm sure at some point that will dip, but if you are going to sell, now's still a good time to do it. So,
That ties
yeah.
into another question I had, which was, how much longer do you think we have till this inevitable bubble blows on the game sellers market? Because, believe me, guys, it is almost definitely a bubble. Like it's going to pop. The only question is,
Oh yeah.
I feel like this one has gone on very long. So
It's because so much of the game's values have been, artificially kind of inflated, and there
Mm-hmm.
hasn't really been enough information given to kind of let people, at least, general buyers, understand the true value of stuff. Like, the people right now that are paying these crazy prices, millions of dollars for Mario and stuff like that, are really not gamers. They are investors who are
No.
thinking, oh, this is just the next thing I can flip and make a profit off of. And the issue is all the value is now built upon this speculative value, right? As long as investors will keep pumping money into it, there's value. But at some point, that investor is going to turn around and want to sell his copy to make a return,
Mm-hmm.
and there's not going to be another investor there to buy it. I think the issue right now is there's not enough data put out by like grading companies and whatnot on how many copies of a game are out there. Like, that's been the big argument is these companies like WADA need population reports. I know WADA finally put one out in was it like last November or December,
I
but
don't
it wasn't
know.
complete. It was like only a population report for NES games, showing like how many of Mario ones came out and scored 9.4, 9.8. But notice
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they put any of that out yet for the N64 market, so that sealed Mario 64, there's no real comparison for it. And that makes it very hard to gauge something based upon where the true value would come from.
I feel
Is
like
it
I should.
rare? Is it unique? Stuff like that.
I feel like I should say, guys, like, if it seems like me and Phoenix aren't quite as knowledgeable on the WADA based stuff, I think it's I think that can be attributed to the fact that, like, as for me, I'm just not a part of the sellers market. I'm 100% a game collector, and I enjoy collecting. I enjoy being able to say I spent $1, $5. You know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
my collection is not something I want to go back and tell people. Oh, I bought. Yeah, I spent 150 on this. You know, like that. To me, part of the fun of the game collecting that the community that we're kind of involved in, part of the fun is the hunt. Like part of the
Hmm.
fun is out, going out there hitting the pavement, as they say. Kind of hitting up all these stores. Bartering stuff like that. It's to me that's.
Was that? There's also there's two different kind of mode of operandums for collecting.
Mm-hmm.
There are those who collect it for like a passion, like or nostalgia. Like I like collecting games because I grew up with games. It brings me back to my childhood. I
Yeah,
have fond
we're man
memories of it, stuff
children.
like that. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But like at this level that we're seeing now with all these graded WADA games, they're not collecting for nostalgia necessarily. Maybe some might be. I won't group it into a majority, but a lot of them are doing this for investment. They could
Mm-hmm.
care less about the game. They just want, their money put into an asset that they can flip and sell. So that's, I think, the disappointing thing about this, and it hurts. It hurts the general collectors like who enjoy the game itself. Like it hurts you and me, sure, because we can't find some of these retro games as easily as we used to. But it even hurts those non-collectors, just like your average Joe who's on the road, not the road, but like going down to play and trade or whatever game store he's going to, and is like, hey, I just want to pick up an old copy of Mario Kart. He just wants to relive his childhood days, hopefully spend 50, $60, get the game and go. He doesn't realize that now Mario Kart is worth like $100, and he has
Mm-hmm.
to buy an N64 with the prices inflated on and all this other stuff. And it now takes that enjoyment away from just general gamers who want to relive a little bit of nostalgia, which is
and
unfortunately.
and all of this ties in really well to our topic from last week where we talked about the Nintendo Direct and how port heavy that Direct was. A
Hmm.
lot of that stuff that we're talking about with WADA and how it affects the grading and what the market is, a lot of that is part of the reason why we were so happy to see so many ports for stuff again like Klonoa, Chrono Trigger, stuff like that. It's
Right.
like, it gives us a way to play those games because once again, I'm not going on WADA and looking for a $500 Klonoa because I don't know, I refuse to spend that much for.
I doubt you'd get it for $500 on WADA. Like if it's WADA and graded, that Klonoa is going to be several $1,000s. Like you can
Really?
go on
Oh,
eBay and
sheesh.
well, that's the thing. Like WADA, you're looking at graded games, and the price jumps exorbitantly after
That's
that.
fair
Like
enough.
yeah, like if you go to eBay and you're looking for a CIB copy of it, then yeah, it's probably $400 or $500, what have you. But as soon as it's graded, man, the sky can be the limit on some of that stuff. Because once again, now you bring investors into it, and they just they pump those prices.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. In a way, that kind of leads us to our other topic. I
Our
don't know if
other
you're ready to
topic.
switch yet.
Yep. Switch right on over.
Yeah, so the eShop stuff, because that's the other side of this coin. Is okay. So you have these retro games that maybe some guys just want to, relive his glory days as a kid and beat his buddies in Mario Kart one last time.
Mm-hmm.
But he's now basically priced out of the option to play it legitimately in many cases. So what most people have turned to is, digital distributed or redistributed copies on different eShops. Like Nintendo was big on that. They had virtual consoles and they'd have re-releases on the 3DS and Wii U and all this other stuff. So that at least gave some avenue for those who didn't want to have to go out and now pay exorbitant prices for the actual hardware, could just play it on more modern systems through these libraries and licenses. And now we're seeing Nintendo cutting it off. So at least for the 3DS and Wii U. So.
Yeah. So I guess as for the specifics on that, essentially that's effective March 2023. So in March 2023, Nintendo is going to be closing the eShops for 3DS and Wii U.
And from what I understand, real quick, I could be wrong, but that's the firm date on when everything shuts down. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean everything's going to stay up until that time. Like, they can slowly start taking stuff down until then.
I think they said they would start taking... Oh, I don't remember time frame. It's sometime this year. I think it was like September of this year. They're going to start... they'll start removing certain things, I believe. I'm probably definitely wrong on that time frame. But I know sometime this year they've said they will... begin closing up shop.
Right.
So yeah, I guess just a little note I had on here. This is just Nintendo continuing its war on emulation and ROM sites, or just its war on emulation and from previously ROM sites. Nintendo has never been willing to bring its huge/deep catalog of previous titles to Virtual Console. Nintendo basically is Bowser when it comes to games preservation. They take their games to their castle and you can't do nada.
So dramatic, Chaz.
I know. I immediately thought of Bowser when I thought of them. So essentially, again, what this means is basically, potentially thousands of digital-only games are going to be lost to the void. So if you guys don't, now's a good time to go and buy whatever games you think you might want on there. I guess more specifics is there if you guys. Gosh, cough. The remaining funds that you guys have on the eShop will transition to Switch shop coins, which I guess that's interesting. I mean, they definitely want you to buy their modern games. Already purchased games can still be recovered on there. If you've already bought them, you can just, I guess, for some reason, they're just going to keep that going on. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work, right?
Well, they'll still have games on the servers, but they're not going to allow you to make new licenses or purchase stuff. If you had to re-download a game, it should still be available for now. I mean, there's no guarantee they'll keep that stuff up forever too. I mean, they could pull the plug on those, distribution services whenever they feel like.
So that's something I didn't think about, but yeah, that would be another reason to make sure you have what you have, basically.
Yeah, I mean. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I didn't.
No, keep on going.
I was going to move on. That's it.
That's all you wanted to say about the eShop?
No. About that one line. I guess basically another thing is the online play apparently will be preserved. I'm assuming, right?
I would imagine that will. Man, I don't know how they handle their multiplayer game connections. Like sometimes that comes down to the actual game itself and who their publisher or should say the developer is. Like are there servers set up where they're dedicated servers that they have to run? Is it peer-to-peer kind of stuff? So that I think will just kind of depend on the game. But I would imagine if they're dedicated servers hosted by Nintendo, that may not be up forever. I mean, we're seeing games start shuttering their servers. Halo, back on the original 360, they just dropped all their servers for that a couple of months ago. So, I mean, there's nothing saying that Nintendo won't do the same, assuming they're using dedicated servers for stuff like I don't know, Mario Kart and 3DS, if that's, something that's still up and running. I checked, I'm sorry.
So what'd you say?
No, I was saying, that might affect games like, something like Mario Kart, even though I don't know exactly how that game handles and something like the 3DS, but assuming they use dedicated servers for that, they might pull the plug on those sooner rather than later.
It could, yeah. So yeah, I guess more, the first thing I immediately thought of when I heard of this story from Phoenix is, It really was reminiscent of, for me, of the Sony, I think just last year when they announced they were going to close the PS3 shop and the PS Vita shop, and then that sent everyone into a frenzy, and they immediately like reversed that decision. So I mean that very much reminded me of that. It is kind of interesting how easy PS3 kind of turned around that decision. That makes me wonder, could Nintendo do that? But we know
they could. Here's my take on that. Sony is in a different realm as far as who they're competing with and how consumer friendly they need to be. Like, even though people are going to argue, who's ahead in a console generation, Sony's got direct competition with someone like Microsoft, right? Mm-hmm. And I know you could argue Microsoft's in a different league than Sony in some ways, but regardless, at a certain point, they want to be as consumer friendly, at least, consumer friendly facing as they can be, because they want to keep people on their side and not, shift over to Xbox. That'll be my original take. They want to seem like a benevolent company in some ways.
But because Nintendo doesn't have a competitor.
Yeah, Nintendo, is kind of their own thing at this point. Like, yes, they are in the same gaming space as these other, entities like Sony and Microsoft, but let's be real, Nintendo plays by their own game, their own rules, they hit their own niches and markets, so they don't need to be as consumer friendly. At least they don't feel like it.
Nintendo's fan base is also so loopy that, like...
Well, they're passionate. Let's say that.
Yeah. I'm one of them. I'm A for them, I feel like.
Well, it's a shame because people love Nintendo because Nintendo puts out great games, great products. You I'm sure could criticize them for various things, but in general, high quality, definitely fun to play, etc., etc.
They rarely put out a bad first party game. Their first party games are like
rarely,
almost
very
always
rarely.
Good. Yeah.
But on the other token of that, even though they always put out good games, they're almost always, or at least it always feels like, they're anti-consumer with a lot of their practices. Like, rarely do they do something that is a benefit to you, the player. Like, they really make things either convoluted with a lot of their systems, or they don't allow you to interact with games a certain way, or as we're talking now, like accessing old games you've already bought through them on old virtual consoles, you can't buy them anymore just because they don't feel like it. And it's because they know they have these valuable IPs in their hand. That's why they have hit so hard on like ROM sites and stuff like that. They know it is marketable for them to hold on to these IPs and force you to rebuy into their infrastructure when they feel like it. Like, they have this
totally
whole,
right. That means they need to free that Bowser guy.
Oh, I feel...
I'm kidding.
I have a lot of opinions on the piracy aspect of it, and I definitely think
that guy deserved to go to... He probably deserved it.
He did... Well... it's hard to say. Like, I agree punishment should have been in place, or punitive measures, but man, it's such an extreme punishment for piracy.
Yeah. They really took it to him.
Then again, he knew what he was doing, but we can come back to that later. I guess my point being... Yeah, my point being, though, that they are looking at, all this old content they have as a way to eventually pull you into, say, this expansion pass that now they have on the Switch, right? Now they're trying to expand the value of it. They're, drip feeding us these N64 re-releases on there. Just a matter of time before we see, more NES, more SNES. Maybe, Wii U games start popping up on there one day. I don't know. But they can, really... strangle us. They have us by the
Kingdom Hearts. Just go put Kingdom Hearts on there.
Yeah, don't put the Kingdom Hearts on there. But no, they have us right where they want us as far as that's concerned, and it's crappy that they're not willing to give us some more wiggle room here as far as how we enjoy games that we have already purchased. But it's their prerogative, unfortunately.
All right, guys. Well, I'm going back through this article and. I feel like there's not really much here. Oh, I did want to kind of quickly touch on the Video Game History Foundation's statement on the closure of Nintendo's legacy digital shops. Essentially what they said is, while it is unfortunate that people won't be able to purchase digital 3DS or Wii U games anymore, we understand the business reality that went into this decision. What we don't understand is what path Nintendo expects its fans to take, should they wish to play these games in the future. As a paying member of the Entertainment Software Association, Nintendo actively funds lobbying that prevents even libraries from being able to provide legal access to these games. Not providing commercial access is understandable, but preventing institutional work to preserve these titles on top of that is actively destructive to video game history. We encourage the ESA members like Nintendo to rethink their position on this issue and work with existing institutions to find a solution. So obviously this is, like we said, this is something Nintendo has very much been active in and kind of ruining fun for many people. But I guess reading that kind of ties me into a quick little question: is should Nintendo be called up more for its lack of willingness to support game preservation, and are they excused simply because they're Nintendo?
They should definitely be called out for it. I think the sad thing is, though, it's not going to make much of a difference.
No.
Nintendo holds all the cards in this situation, right? Like, we could scream all we want, but they know that when push comes to shove, they could use these IPs again to resell us these copies of games, and we would buy them again, or at least a large portion of the community does. So unless there was a way to hit them in their wallets, which, let's be real, that's probably not going to happen, then Nintendo's going to do what serves them best here financially. I mean, as that statement read, I get why they're taking down these stores. Like, I get the financial burden that keeping the services up and running.
There is a purpose behind it. It's not just them being, you know.
Yeah, I don't think it was malicious. It just was serving them best. But yeah, they are making it very difficult to play certain games legally. And, you know, I think the bigger issue is I could almost even understand, you know, like games that had a physical release that also have a digital release, like not doing something else to provide the digital version of that at some point, even though I'd love to see that. If the game is at least out there in the wild physically, then you can still play the game somehow. But as this mentions, as well as some other articles, there's like 1,000 or more digital-only games that never had physical releases.
More than 1,000, yeah.
Yeah, that those are just going to go poof. And I think that's definitely a sad thing. So Mike, I have a question kind of for you in that regard. Do you think that because of that particular situation, does that validate the concept of piracy?
Does that validate the concept of piracy?
For this particular, you know,
in this situation, yeah. I really do think it does, and I understand the argument against piracy and why piracy is bad, but I mean, I guess it would come down to the numbers. Like are the numbers like when, like, I'm sure piracy still goes on. Like I would think you would have to be like very deep into the company of Nintendo to really know just how much piracy affects your sales, how much it affects reception. I mean, I have less of a problem with piracy of older games than I do newer. Like, newer games, obviously, that affects, you know, development teams and stuff like that, and I'm very much against that. Go buy your brand new game, you know, Elden Ring. Don't pirate Elden Ring, you know, but As for something old, like, I don't know. For me, I don't care so much. But that's just me. What about you?
So I mean, this might seem a little odd based upon my original stance. I was saying kind of be, you know, up in arms against Nintendo, but let me just phrase it like this for a second. So let's say, Chaz, you made a video that turned out to be very profitable for you, okay? And maybe it's, you know, it could be a new video or an old video that you're still profiting off of. Maybe it's a video that you make now, and in 20 years you're still, you know, getting funds off of it. And then you find out in 20 years that someone has now copied that video and posted it onto the platform, and you're no longer being compensated for that. How would you feel?
I don't like this switcheroo you just did.
But that's the point, is people don't think about that. Like, it's easy to come at, you know, big bad Nintendo makes all the money, and they, you know, should be okay with piracy because they have enough money, or they're not really losing sales. And here's the thing, that's all besides the fact. Like, they may not be losing sales directly because of piracy, or they might be. Maybe you are affecting a development team, or you're not. Here's the thing. You didn't make that content. You do not own that IP. That is something they made, and they have the rights over, whether you like it or not.
But then they should be criticized more because they don't make their games more available.
100%, and I agree. There's definitely criticism there, and I mean, it's crappy. I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, it's an okay situation that Nintendo's putting you in by removing these games from the platform and not offering you anything else. I don't think that should then be an okay to go and pirate something, because here's the thing:
agree. I get your argument.
I don't know. I hate the idea that it just makes it okay to take someone else's content or IP. Like, they did work hard to create that thing. Like, there would be no Mario without Nintendo, and, you know, if Nintendo wanted to, they could take the whole ball and just go home with it and not, you know, create any new games for us. And then where would we be? So, I mean, I'm not trying to justify what this particular situation is kind of playing out like, but I don't think that, okay, now we just need to go pirate everything. That's, although I know that's how it's going to play out for a lot of people, and there is,
Mm-hmm.
I think, people that will argue from a, archival standpoint, that's what should be done, but I don't really fall into that camp. Not that I'm going to come on somebody if they do end up pirating something. That's a
Mm-hmm.
decision you make if you want to take on the repercussions for it. But that's the thing too. Nintendo will come after you. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
not so much for the actual downloading of games, but if you end up on the side of distributing, whew, man, we saw what happened to poor Bowser.
Once again, I, I think I think their stance on piracy and all that stuff is fair, and I think it's worthy. I just think if they're gonna do that, then man, find a way to make those games accessible. Find a way like people aren't out pirating Xbox 360 games. You know why? Because you can play like 75% of all of them on the modern consoles. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah, like a company like Xbox
and
or
those games are
Microsoft,
available on
everyone,
PC. A lot of them too. So it's like,
yeah, they made a lot of very consumer-friendly focused, prerogatives in recent years, and I think that's really benefited them. Like, it's helped turn the Microsoft, or I should say specifically the Xbox brand over, based, upon its terrible Xbox One release and how negative that was received.
mm,
We've now seen a big shift because they put out a lot of consumer-friendly practices. You can play your
mm-hmm.
old games easily. You have this whole library now of easily accessible things.
This
Like,
library, my library over here. I'm trying to get that library
what?
right there. No, I was.
Oh,
You couldn't see me. I was pointing at the 360 library.
oh yeah. But that's goodwill, right? And it's not meaning that they're not still going to profit off of sales and whatnot, but they've at least given those who want to enjoy their old games an avenue to do so. And I don't think they are being negatively affected by it. I'd love to see
Mm,
Nintendo do something like that. And honestly, I wouldn't care so much if the expansion pass system ended up being that. Like, if they were able to just wrap all their old digital distributions into this one service, kind of like how Game Pass is, even
mm,
if you had to pay for it. If that was the only way time I had to do that, like, I don't want it to end up like another virtual console where whenever the Switch is done, I have to rebuy everything again on the Switch 2
yeah.
virtual console. But if it's just like an open subscription where I can just as the consoles grow and evolve and whatnot, I can still have this subscription access to things. Although there's definitely downsides to having all these subscriptions. I would be more okay with that personally, because at least they're giving you an avenue to play things in a
Mm-hmm.
legal format. I think that's justifiable. But right now, they're just not doing that.
Okay, so we are getting near a time constraint, so I'm going to start moving quickly. But I did have one more little aspect to add on to this, and then we'll move on to the next topic. So yeah, the secondary games market is already seeing skyrocketing prices for physical titles. Just how crazy do you think the game sellers market will get for 3DS and Wii U games?
I think for Wii U more so than 3DS. Like, I don't know. You
I
have
need
to
that
kind
Breath
of.
of the Wild Wii U. I still don't have one. I
Oh
need.
yeah, I got one sealed from Walmart about a year ago, and they were
Ah,
giving away for $30. I should have bought all of
sheesh.
them.
I know. I should have bought one.
Here's my thing. Like, you have to try to think of a comparison here to kind of see where they're going to go from the game market. Like, look at something like the GameCube, okay, which is a console that has almost no form of digital distribution at all, right? It was before all of that. So the only way to even play those games nowadays is physical. And that was also a platform that didn't sell all that well in comparison. There aren't that many copies of all the games out there. So that's probably a good place to kind of start your pricing, as far as like comparing where the 3DS and Wii U are going to go. The thing with the 3DS is, even though yes, we're getting rid of the digital avenue of buying those games, 3DS was an extremely popular system, right? I mean, I don't know exactly how many they sold,
Aren't they
but
still supporting it? Yeah. Well, yeah, of course.
yeah, I
They
mean, I think
stopped
they're
selling them like not long ago. I thought.
they're just kind of wrapping down support. If they haven't already, it's very soon. But I mean, highly successful console, sold a crap load of units. There's a lot of games, or I should say, I'm sorry, number of certain games out there. So even with the digital side dropping, I think there's enough copies of games out there that they're not gonna go crazy. Like, it'll definitely spike as soon as the store shuts down, just because people are gonna freak out about it a little bit. But it will settle and then slowly kind of start increasing back up, probably based upon the rarity of the actual game. Now, Wii U, I think, is going to be a lot higher because Wii U is just, it sold so poorly. There's so few copies of the different games out there that they will truly become more collector's pieces just because of how rare they are. So I think you'll see those get up to those GameCube levels pretty quickly, maybe even beyond that. So I don't know. I'm not overly worried about it, to be honest. I mean, I have a lot of the games I
Mm-hmm.
would want on both those systems. Not saying that there aren't games out there I wouldn't mind picking up, but I would just take it how I do with all my other game collecting. If I come across it at a good deal, I'll pick it up. I'm not going to go pay $100, $200 for a game that I might find one day for $5. So
Fair enough. All right, guys. So we'll move on to our last couple little topics here. So I'm going to move back over to the browser. So this is one Phoenix sent me, and I actually really liked kind of the precedents or the topic. But essentially, it just talks about how or this is another Kotaku article, I should say, by the same person, Ari Notice, who did that big haul topic we covered. So good on Ari. But essentially, Square Enix is impossible to please. So this one, I don't know, did you want to tackle this one more? You want to kind of intro this one?
I can. I mean, it's basically just talking about how Guardians of the Galaxy, the game, did not meet their expectations. So that's concerning because that was a good game by all or I should say most measures. I know you didn't get a chance to play
I haven't
it, but
played it yet. I want to play it at some point.
yeah, I think you would enjoy it. I know you're a huge Guardians
I
fan.
love the
At
movies.
least,
Yeah.
you enjoy the movies, and this definitely has that feel. Like, I mean, it's different, but if you like the movies, I think you'd like the game. The game was fun, looked great. It wasn't a real gamey game, if that makes sense. Like, it was definitely kind of like a,
Like a Telltale? Like a fun...
No. It had more than that, but the story and the environment was more the focus over like the moment to moment gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, it was still an enjoyable experience, and I thought it was worth playing through for sure. So I guess the interesting thing here is essentially Square Enix, the publisher, is seeing it as a failure.
Let me know where you want me to scroll down, or can.
I don't. It doesn't really matter to me.
Okay, I'll stay here.
So then the argument is, I mean, that's not the first time they've felt that way. Like, what was it? They mentioned when they first rebooted Tomb Raider. They thought that was a failure when it first came out. And they even backed out of, I think, publishing the most recent Hitman because I guess the first two didn't turn out as well for them. So I guess the question here is, these games that by at least critical measurements are successful, they're good, solid games.
Yeah, it won the best narrative trophy at the 2021 Game Awards. Like,
yeah, what stick is Square Enix measuring everything by? Like, I think that's the argument this article's making, and I'd be curious to know too. Like, what are the expectations they're setting up for these games? And obviously, we're looking at mostly like single player games, and I'm curious if that has anything to do with it. But are they setting these just outrageous expectations that would never be met, or is it truly these games just didn't sell well for various reasons? Like, I know Guardians must not have sold great. They mentioned in the article that they dropped the price real quick after it launched, and we saw that. Yeah, it was down to 30, and I even saw like cheaper sales too, depending on how you bundled it up with stuff. So they were definitely just trying to get that game sold at a pretty deep discount. So didn't sell well. It was a good game, but what does that mean for like the future, how they move forward with games like this? Like, does that mean we're just not going to see a Guardians 2 because that didn't turn out so well for them, or are they going to readjust their expectations? I mean, what are your thoughts?
I think what it is it's probably just typical kind of greediness on the part of a publisher. I mean, another little thing to add on here is it says Square Enix viewed the 2013 reboot of Tomb Raider, the best-selling entry in one of the gaming's most iconic franchises, as a disappointment as well. And that was actually a pretty good game. So it's, for me, it's very troubling. It's like again, what exactly are you expecting? Like, these games are critically favored. They probably sell well and make their money back, but it's like, what do you think you're Madden? You trying to get like $2 billion of money a year for a story-driven game?
Yeah, and it's really hard to say for sure for some of this. Like, I don't know how much it costs them to make Guardians, or to put it out. I don't know if I'm assuming they fronted the bill for development if they're the publisher in this case. But regardless, it's always a balance between how much it costs to develop and publish versus how much money they make up. And I get if Guardians didn't sell well, but
Sorry,
how much money did they put into it? Huh?
No, it just says Outriders developer People Can Fly said it had yet to receive any royalties from Square Enix when that game was It says right here, took the world by storm, rapidly hitting 3.5 million players, with Square even saying it's on track to become the company's next major franchise, and they haven't received any royalties.
Man.
Funny. Not funny, but...
So, do you think that the issue is because these are like single-player games? Like, would they feel differently if these were, multiplayer games that they could milk with microtransactions? Or
you just answered what I was going to say. I think that's why. It's just, I think they have. I mean, I'm guessing where they think that they think they're going to make the most of their money is with like a season pass, probably for these games, or with some kind of huge DLC. I know the Avengers game was like that too, where it was like, hey, we're gonna wait for Spider-Man, and it's like that Spider-Man thing came and went. Why? Because the initial game was not very good, and I don't think anyone ended up caring about Spider-Man. But I don't know. For me,
so do you think the issue is because it's single player, and that's why they're harping on it?
Oh yeah, probably. I mean, I'm sure a game like that doesn't sell anything like. I don't know, what's some big PvP game that, Fortnite. I mean, Fortnite just has. I don't know. I don't know how to compare the two. Those two game types.
You really can't.
There's a limit to how much these type of games can produce. Like,
it's tricky too. Like, I mean, what gamers are willing to spend their time on has changed a lot, and we've talked about this a little bit too, but I don't think that means that single player games aren't valued by any means. Like, that's how Sony's kind of built their empire over the past few years, has been how strong, solid single player games. And I certainly think it's not an issue that developers and publishers don't want to maybe try the single player games. It's just, will it make them money? Like, look at something like EA when they put out Jedi Fallen Order. Like, I think that was a surprise to a lot of people, because I think we were all assuming that EA wouldn't want to invest in a single player game because that didn't seem like to be their track record.
I love that game though.
Yeah, and that served them really well. Now, granted, I know that game sold really well too, and that may be because it's Star Wars. That's I don't want to say a bigger franchise.
But that also wasn't made by EA. That was made by it was published, but Respawn was like a new entry. That was like a new company they brought in.
Yeah, but when they decide about pushing forward these single-player games, it's about, the publishers. If they're going to invest in, that particular project. Like, they chose Respawn to make that game. It was very much an EA decision. And I'm sure it was similar with Square Enix.
Well,
they
Respawn had a good pedigree, because I really enjoyed the campaign for Titanfall 2.
What's interesting about that, though, is Respawn was a really odd decision, I think, for Fallen Order. Like, Respawn's a great developer, and yeah, I love Titanfall, but that was a shooter. That was not a Souls-like adventure game that Jedi Fallen Order ended up being. So I know there's a lot of arguments over who the developer should have been for that game, but I just find that an interesting comparison, because clearly you have a publisher that either gauged their expectations well for that game, or just for whatever reason that game just completely outdid their expectations, versus something like this with Square Enix and Guardians, where it undersold for whatever kind of expectation they set. So I don't know. I'm curious what they're basing those expectations on. Is it other games they've been releasing? Like, were they comparing that to how Marvel Avengers did, or are they comparing it to other games on the market like Fallen Order, or are they comparing it to live service games? Like, any one of those measuring sticks is going to change how successful they judge one of these games.
I think it's probably just basic corporate greediness. Just basic. We spent X amount on the IP to get Guardians, so therefore we need to make this. We need to make this, and to come out even on the production costs, we need to go this much higher than, getting the IP. I'm sure it's just basic.
It could be a cynical thing too, or a scenario where like it probably broke even. They probably did profit off it, but you got to think whose pockets get filled first in these situations. It's not the developers; it's the guys sitting up top. So they made their amount, realized there wasn't maybe enough profit to, push forward with new development on a sequel or something, so they were going to call it a failure, but I'm sure they got pretty rich off it.
Another quick question I got is, do you think these lofty expectations and stuff like that, do you think these are often set mostly by the publisher and the company and the board itself, or do you think like investors play like a bigger role than maybe that? Because like it could be that like
Well, they're kind of one and the same when you think about it. Like, I mean, you have your publisher, but publisher decisions are based upon pleasing their, their stakeholders. So, the stakeholders are going to have an expectation of you meeting a certain profit amount for that particular project. So, the publishers are going to try to shoot to meet that or exceed that. So, yes, I mean, it's both of those things kind of put together. I certainly don't think the developers are setting those expectations. I think, honestly, the developers probably have the most realistic expectations over how the game's going to sell or play out. But the publishers that don't see it from that same perspective at all. They just think, how much do we need to do to please our, stakeholders?
All right, well, we kind of ran past our little time, but I'll say we'll cover one last little topic, and this will be quick. But yeah, I'll switch back over. So our final little topic here is recently Street Fighter 6 was announced through a little teaser by Capcom, and let's just say there's quite a bit of discourse right now over the logo for Street Fighter 6. I guess before we talk about that, just what did you think about the logo itself? Does it look neat to you? Does it look like Street Fighter? No.
No, I mean, well, okay. So ultimately, I don't care. Like, if I was gonna play Street Fighter, I'd care about how the game played over how the logo is. That's not a big sticking point for me. But if I am gonna judge the logo, yeah, it's boring, especially when you consider like Street Fighter, especially in recent years. I mean, you could argue always, but the past
flashy.
Yeah, it's very flashy, very
bright,
stylized. Like, I remember when they switched over to, I want to say it was Street Fighter 4, when there was, like, 360 era. Like, that was, like, the super stylized kind of art direction they went for, and the logo matched that, and it was cool. It was fitting. I mean, it kind of fit that flashy martial arts style, and they kind of kept that going through pretty much every iteration of Street Fighter that I can recall. So, this is such a deviation from it.
Well, what I always thought about at that time that Street Fighter contrasted against was Mortal Kombat. Street Fighter was brighter, more colorful, like the art style was definitely different. And this looks more like a Mortal Kombat logo to me than a Street Fighter logo. Like, Mortal Kombat logos are generally pretty basic. It's the word Mortal Kombat with a word underneath it, and it's generally white, this just looks more MK.
Yeah, if they change those little like spray paints to like blood splatters, it'd totally be a MK logo.
Yeah, I think what I read that people think the reason that they did this is before esports. People think that they are going so heavy into esports that they wanted to create something that looked good, posted at some events or something.
Oh yeah, maybe. I mean, I guess I can see that argument. I mean, I'm not huge on esports by any means, but
me neither.
I can see it does, I guess, match that kind of cleaner aesthetic. It'd be more marketable. Maybe. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I don't know how much that really matters when it comes down to it. I mean, I don't know. I would feel like most people would hopefully judge a game based upon the game, less than the logo. But
Yeah, this is just a surface level kind of view of something I thought was kind of funny, just how angry some people are over this. But I guess people have done some digging. And it turns out that it bears a striking similarity to a logo available through Adobe Stock Image, which, how does that happen? How do you... I mean, well, it's basically the same thing.
Yeah, I honestly would probably imagine, that's what happened. They saw that logo and modeled it after that. But to be fair...
If they paid Adobe, I guess there's no problem, I guess.
Well, okay, so this is where I'm interested in. So... when you buy any piece of art from, whether it be Adobe Stock or somewhere else, you buy to license and utilize that object. So, like, they may have licensed that from Adobe. Here's the thing, though. Usually, and I could be wrong, every license is a little different. When you buy a license for a piece of art or, logo, whatever, you're not supposed to change it. You're supposed to leave it intact in its original format. Maybe with like some variations, you can do like, some color adjustments, stuff like that. But when you tweak it and you affect the original content, that can be misconstrued, and you're not supposed to be able to do that per the license.
I think I heard they're already being sued. Or sued, or they're already being sued, or
no, construed, misconstrued.
No, I'm saying
changed.
I'm saying somebody.
I'm not talking about sued.
No, but I'm saying, I think I read somewhere that somebody is already coming to them and saying, "Hey, you need to pay something." Yeah.
If it's from Adobe, yes. If
Yes.
they really took it from them.
Or no, it's
And
not
you can.
Adobe. Is it the? I think it's this
Oh,
company.
that guy.
Yeah, it's this company.
Yeah, and it's so hard to say. Like, here's the thing, and this was my other topic. That's a common enough kind of logo font choice. Like, I've seen other industries use stuff like that.
Hmm.
You know, arguing that it was, copyrighted material and they're infringing upon that is going to be a little tricky because they have to prove that, okay, they based it on their logo and it wasn't somebody else's. And I don't know. Regardless, like, it's not a good look for Capcom by any means. And whether they got it from Adobe or they made that up or they're either, treading some legal waters there, or I guess the reason is why would they want to? Like, why is all this controversy worth having this logo? They had to either foresee this was going to be a problem, or whoever was overseeing the art department did not do their due diligence and look into the creation of this logo.
Hmm.
Because that seems like a pretty big oversight, especially if the community found all these comparisons so fast.
Yeah, but so I guess anything else you had to say? I mean that's basically it. That was just a pretty basic surface level view of just
Do you think
logo.
they're going to change it based upon all this? Do you think Capcom's going to be like, okay, fine, we'll just change it to
I think
something
it
else?
depends if someone, if one of these companies actually like tries to sue them or tell them, hey, you did a no, you need to pay us. I think they might. I mean, I can't. I mean, this looks like something I could have done in like an hour. Like
Hmm.
I find it hard to believe you couldn't find some random artist to make something leaps and bounds better than that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the issue would be if they've already pushed forward with a lot of marketing material that has that logo on it.
Mm-hmm.
Changing it now is a little tricky, but I know it's just been like slowly released in a preview, so I don't know how much marketing material has really been released. So they might have a window here to pull back and be like, "Oh no, that was just a temporary logo," and maybe they'll be able to save some face and do something a little flashier. But yeah, I mean, I personally don't care, but I definitely think they could have done a better job.
Mm-hmm. Well, guys, I think that'll kind of wrap everything up. I mean, we touched on everything for this week. But yeah, I guess Phoenix, is there anything else you wanted to say? What you got going on? What you plan on doing this week before our next episode?
Honestly, not a whole lot on the gaming side. I just kind of wrapped up with Pokemon. I finally completed my Pokedex,
I
so
still
yeah,
need to
you
do
should be
that. Oh.
proud. It wasn't really worth it, at least not as far as like what it gives you at the end or anything. But I enjoyed the process. We talked about that last week. I enjoyed that game, but I will probably be taking a bit of a hiatus from playing some stuff. I got some other projects I'm working on, but
I'm in the
I know what
same
you're
boat.
getting into.
I know. I really don't want to play anything new because I'd like to work on something, but
Oh, how can you avoid Elden Ring though? You know you've been waiting for it.
I know I'm gonna go buy it tomorrow. I think it comes out tonight, right? 25th. Yeah.
Now,
Um,
have you? I know we're kind of getting on a side topic here, but have you played any of the Dark Souls?
I've never played a Dark Souls game. Never. I've never played Bloodborne, Sekiro, any of the Dark Souls. So this
So
is
what piqued
definitely
your interest about Elden Ring?
just the fact that George R. R. Martin is involved, and I kind of like. Again, I like more like everyone. Well, from the last podcast, I like more of the Lord of the Rings type fantasy aspect, and this definitely is more of that type of world versus the ninja aspect that was Sekiro or the I don't know what the heck you would call the Dark Souls world or Bloodborne, but yeah, I kind of like the environments of this one. This one looks a little bit more, magey, wizardy type stuff. I kind of dig that.
Yeah.
Um, they're good.
Well, it's getting great reviews, so
It's
I can't imagine you won't have a good time.
It's getting great reviews. I think from what I actually listened to Skellup's review, and he didn't do any like spoiler based stuff, but he said if you're someone who found those games, all the normal Dark Souls games to be ridiculously hard, then this is a fantastic place to start, which is good because he said it's hard, but it's not brutal like all those other games. He said this is actually a really good place for someone entry level into the Dark Souls world. So, what do you think? With just real quick, knowing that, does that interest you more? Knowing it's maybe not going to be as brutal.
Well, the brutal aspect was never what put me off to those games. I like a good hard game. I don't know. It was maybe a stylistic thing about those games. Like they always looked a little depressing to me. I don't know. And maybe it's just that haunting kind of art style I'm not always in the mood to kind of spend a huge amount of time in. Elden Ring seems to kind of follow that same trend. I think it's pretty in its own way, but that's not usually my style artistically of game to spend a lot of time with. But no, maybe that will change. I mean, I've watched some of the reviews and it looks like my style of game. Like I definitely like how open it is, how much you can invest in the world, and how flexible it is as far as where you go, what you do. So those tentatively check off a lot of boxes for me, but I don't know. I'm not in a rush to play that game by any means. I still got Horizon on my horizon whenever I get around to that. But
That's been
at
pretty
some
good
point,
scores too. I think that's like 8 9s I've seen.
yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward to that. But I think Elden Rings might be the first kind of Souls-like game to kind of win me over. We shall see. But it's not going to be anything I play
I can't wait
anytime
to
soon.
be a wizard. Just want to be a wizard mage or something and run
All right,
around and
Harry.
throw things at people.
Well, I'm sure you have a wonderful time. I suppose we get to talk about that next week, assuming you actually get some time to play it.
Oh yeah, we can make that an opening topic, topic 1 or 2, or just my kind of basic. I mean, this weekend I'm probably not gonna have much time to play it. Like I'll probably try and play it some Saturday night, maybe tomorrow night if I can kind of, pop out this podcast and all this stuff pretty easily. But yeah, I definitely plan on at least starting Friday night, maybe Saturday, possibly.
All right, well, enjoy it, man.
All right. Well, we've done it all, guys. I just wanted to say thank you so much, guys. I love you. Please be safe. And I can't wait to see you on the next one. All right, Phoenix. It was good talking with you. And can't wait to talk to you again.
All right, I'll crawl back in the basement. Bye.
Bye, guys.